All right, guys, I think we can get started. We have a whole lot of 30 minutes to kill here. So here's my promise to you. In the next 30 minutes, you'll know everything you need to know about troubleshooting NSX. We'll go to the moon, and we'll be back, all right? So that's my promise. That's all that we can achieve in 30 minutes. So to be very honest, you can't, obviously, right? So the thing is, you can't even do troubleshooting for NSX in 30 minutes. NSX is not a product. NSX is a platform with a lot of products, right? So what am I trying to do here is not try to teach you how you can do the whole troubleshooting of NSX, but to give you some takeaways that you can apply, the methodology that you can apply towards troubleshooting. So before we do that, who am I? My name is Hamad Alam. I'm part of the NSBU customer success team within VMware. The customer success team is essentially created to make sure that customers are successful in their journey for NSX, from buying to deployment and so forth. And my team is involved in a lot of different areas, from enablement, from design, deploy, escalations, a lot of various hats we wear. And as part of those engagements, one of the things I'm very blessed with is customer interaction, meeting with a lot of folks like you in various ways on site and on calls and whatnot. So what I'm trying to present here is, in past 5 years, what I've learned is that if you enable yourself on these methodologies, the chances of success would be great or better for what it's worth. So very quickly, disclaimer about the session. I'm not really presenting anything which is not already GA'd. All the things that I'm going to talk about, they're already out there, so you can start using, or you're probably already using it. Customer success is part of global services team, so I encourage you to come meet us. Global service is what brings you support, VMware support, and Skyline, and a lot of different interactions that you have. So NSX Data Center is our key topic today, but NSX, the umbrella term of virtual cloud networking, is to allow you to protect your network and secure your network wherever it is, irrespective of it's in the data center, it's in the cloud, in your data center, or a provider's data center. And today we're going to focus on the private data centers because we're talking about NSX for vSphere. So the key agenda, and I'm going to go fast, and I'll stay for questions after the session. So the agenda here is, what is my NSX operations landscape? So if I'm an NSX engineer, or if I'm a manager, if I'm a VP, or in all those, however I'm interacting with NSX, the first thing one of the things I need to understand is what are the tools that are available to me, and where do they fit? So before I can start using anything, or I can tell my ops guys, hey, go use this or that, how do I teach them, or how do I bucketize the different types of tools that are available to them, right? So that's the landscape. So once you walk out, I'm hoping that you'd be able to frame the tools that are available in some sort of buckets, and you can say, these are the tools that these kind of guys should be able to use, and these are the tools that these kind of guys should be able to use. Then we're going to talk about a methodology that you can use, again, to enable yourself, your teams on troubleshooting NSX. Then, as I said, I'm coming from the field, and I'm amongst you guys. So what are some of the lessons? I can't take this to show troubleshooting of everything, but I'm going to apply it to distributed firewall, which is one of the key use case a lot of customers have, and see how it can fit there. And then I'm going to talk about one of the projects I've worked on, NSX-PowerOps. So before we go, how many of you have NSX running in some fashion in your environment? Wow, that's great. Great to see that. Okay, so operations landscape. So the very first thing you think about when you bought NSX, or when you deployed NSX, and you're not going anywhere else, like other tools that you need to operationalize and monitor and troubleshoot environment, is what are the tools that NSX comes with on its own, right? So that's the very first slice. So I'm going to put this in 3 buckets. The first bucket is NSX native tools. So these tools are not external, they're part of the product. And another thing to remember is these are the tools that are closest to the truth, right? The truth is your packet. When the packet is moving, what is the thing that can take you to the closest and show you what's actually happening? There are tools and things which are outside, then there's dependency and time lags and this and that, right? So one of the things that I'm going to try to do is, and hopefully there's no marketing guy in here, is also tell you where you should use and where it's not a good fit to use, right? You need to know both sides. Not everything is green, right? So from the NSX native tools option, NSX Manager UI is a very good way for you to start looking at the environment. If you don't have anything external in NSX 6.4, especially the UI has been really enhanced. There's a very good dashboard. There's a system scale information in here, controllers, manager, things like backup is taken or not. There's a lot of information just natively baked into the tool. Then you have the RESTful API and central CLI. So the power of NSX is that all the entities within NSX, from a component perspective, a stats perspective, they're available to you via REST API. So if you wanted to make a workflow or routine for your teams to, if for example, when a problem comes, these are the 3 things we want to look at, right? You can make those flows as a REST API calls for you guys as well. Then you have flow monitoring, trace flow, and endpoint monitoring as some of the tools. So flow monitoring, trace flow, I'm going to talk about it a little bit more, but endpoint monitoring very quickly. So what it does is, if you have a VM and you're wondering if the traffic from the VM is coming, port 80 traffic is coming out, but you don't know if it's coming from chrome.exe or somebody is doing iPerf or somebody is doing PuTTY, using PuTTY to do that. So you don't know, don't have the visibility of what inside the VM is generating that traffic, right? And oftentimes it's challenging because the application owners may just say, well, this is happening to my environment, and as the operations guy, you need to figure out what is actually happening, right? So endpoint monitoring is very useful, where you can take the NSX UI, just native NSX UI, to look at a Windows VM and see what executable is actually generating that kind of traffic. And if it's within the data center, it's also going to tell you which executable on the destination is receiving this traffic. So that kind of visibility is very, very powerful when you need to do troubleshooting. Then there's support for a lot of standard protocols. That's the first bucket. So I have the NSX native tools. Now what's outside the native tools? The second layer to think about is the VMware ecosystem. So what are the tools that VMware provides to me? So VMware provides you a login site. So if you're an NSX customer, login site is free for you, and you should be using it. Then you have the Network Insight, which is the premier network troubleshooting tool for NSX. And then you have a lot of open source projects. So I'll mention, for example, PowerNSX and NSX-PowerOps. PowerNSX is a PowerShell wrapper for NSX. If you need to automate your environment, PowerNSX is definitely something you want to look at. If you're familiar with PowerCLI, PowerShell, this fits right in. It's right there. NSX-PowerOps takes it to the next level, where it automates the documentation and health check of your environment. We'll touch upon that towards the end of the presentation. And the last piece is partner ecosystem. So all of you are running a data center. So you don't only have VMware products. You have products from a lot of different partners. So you want to look at some of these partners and see which of these I already have in my environment, and then how do I integrate and extend this into NSX? And I highly encourage you to go to the Solutions Exchange, where a lot of these partners have their booth set up, and you can ask them how you can help build or operate or monitor my NSX environment better. All right, so now let's go next into our core of the topic, which is troubleshooting methodology. The first thing I want to highlight, this is because I get into this conversation a lot, understanding NSX as a technology. So it's not saying that we're going to teach you how routing works or how a firewall works. That's, you guys already all know that. You're running data centers. But in NSX, there's a different way of doing things. And if you don't know anything, you just don't know. If I don't know what is VSFWD and a 5671 TCP connection is very important for the health of my environment, then how are you going to monitor that? How are you going to operate? So the basic install, config, manage course of NSX is highly, highly recommended. I work with a lot of customers who take those courses, customers who don't, and the efficiency of the environment that they run reflects in the training that they have got. So if any of you have not and you are running NSX environment, I highly encourage you to go with that. Now, let's say if I'm involved with a customer and there's some problem, right? Something happened, and there are two things that usually get asked. The first thing is, hey, do you have any documentation about your environment? Like, do you have a Visio? What kind of policies are you using? You're using IP sets, so how are they designed? Like, just what kind of documentation you have. And unfortunately, most of the times the answer is we don't have anything. Or what we have is what PSO did like a year ago. And that was just a very beginning because there wasn't much at that time. And things have changed and nothing has been updated, right? And the second question is, if something breaks, is what changed in the environment? And then you're like, well, nothing changed, right, as far as we know. But we all know there's something changed. Maybe you didn't think that it relates to it. Maybe it was a human error, something like that, right? But something has changed. So now the whole troubleshooting takes like a lot of time to get to what changed. And it may be something that changed dynamically. For example, BGP routing, right? You didn't change the neighbor config, but the route propagation eventually changed the routing table, right? So you didn't touch anything, but something changed. How do you counter that? How do you get to that, right? So NSX-PowerOps is one of the things that could help you realize network insight is definitely something that would be useful. Now, the next level is from a troubleshooting methodology perspective. Now that you know about your environment and you know the NSX technology, is what are my level 1 and level 2 troubleshooting tools? So level 1, level 2 can be, you can think about from a skill set perspective. You can also think about when I start troubleshooting, where do I go first kind of thing. So you can slice it in however way you want. But level 1, level 2 is essentially network insight and log insight. So I was working with one of my customers. He was an architect as a law firm. And he said that I have told my operations team that you should not be in NSX UI for your day-to-day operations. You should be driving everything from network insight. Whatever you need to know, you should be able to do from network insight. That was a very powerful statement, and I concur with like 90% of that. There may still be 10, 15% of the things that you can do from network insight from a day-to operations perspective. Not like making changes, but looking at the environment. Then you have log insight and the UI I talked about and the native tools. So these are your level 1, level 2. So anybody in your NOC which is touching NSX at a level 1, level 2 skill set perspective, this is the things that they should be comfortable with, right? You're not looking for them to be comfortable with all central CLI and REST API and Power NSX and whatnot, but this is the base level that they should be able to easily use. Then you have the advanced guys, for your advanced troubleshooting or level 3, level 4, you have central CLI. So the key to central CLI is, back in the days when I used to troubleshoot routing or switching, I have like 10 PuTTY windows open to all these different things, and I'm trying to correlate information there. What central CLI does is that you just SSH to NSX Manager, and from there, you can gather information from the entire distributed system. You can say, host 100 VMX, I want to see the firewall rules. I want to see the routing table from host 200 or whatever, right? So you don't need to go anywhere. You can just be at a central place and you can gather all that information. So that's just the CLI of NSX Manager. Then you have Packet Capture UI, and I'm going to show you a quick demo about that. And the last one is support for automation. Coming back to what I said, Power NSX, REST API, these are your friends if you are into automation, right? And we'll talk about PowerOps, how it supports automation. So now let's move into the next piece, which is applying this to distributed firewalls. So I'm not going to take like one example and show you, but I'm going to show you like how it fits, like what kind of different information it shows. Same way that we talked about level 1, level 2 guys. The first thing is vRLI network insights. You'll have a lot of sessions in VMware talking about network insight, you'll see the demos around flow monitoring, or not flow monitoring, but flows and east-west flows and whatnot. So I'll save that stuff for those sessions. Today what I'm going to talk about is something that I saw from the field. And before I go there, the key thing, again, being transparent, is that vRLI's network inside is great for your overall management of the environment. But what is the flip side of it? The one thing to remember when using it is it collects data from the different systems and it crunches it. It's analytics based, right? So the time it takes to take the data, crunch it, and make it searchable, there's about like a 5 to 10 minute delay between the actual packet happening and when you can see it on the network inside, right? So you got to remember that, because if you're doing active troubleshooting where you're reproducing something and you want to see it, you're not going to see that there, right? So again, what are the gotchas, or what are the things to know? Now, let me show you this. So this was an environment, and this was a very US-centric kind of customer. And with using the vRLI's network inside, I wrote a simple query saying, I want to see flows where the destination country is not United States. I just wanted to see, it was post some of the threats that recently happened. I was like, I just want to see where the traffic is going, right? And there were some, and then there are a couple that stood out. So if you look at the bottom one, so as you can see here, there's the connection going to some IP in some country and whatnot. I don't want to expose that, because that's not the point. But basically, there's something going to a different country on port 73, which is remote job service, and this actual environment, right? So I'm like, why are you going there? And if you look at the packets, it's 420 bytes, like very little amount of data. It's not a lot of data. Other things that I've seen, the powerful searches, searching for NTP servers. So we found a number of servers which are going to some weird country's NTP server. Why are you going over there? And are you even transferring NTP data on those things, right? Now, you can go into forensic, but the power of the search I'm just demonstrating is really great with Network Insight. And there's a lot of other things from troubleshooting and monitoring, but I just wanted to show you something which is a little different. Now, the next piece I wanted to show about is Log Insight. So Log Insight is great because one of the things is that it gives you flexible dashboards. So you can build your own dashboards, your own views. Think about it. And I'm sorry I'm going too fast, but don't have a lot of time here. So you have your tier 1 application, right? The most important application everybody's worried about in your environment. And when that goes down or has some issue, you start, okay, we need to look at logs, what's going on? And then at that point, you're like, what log file should I look at? And in this log file, there are like 1 million lines in the past hour. What should I search for, right? Or what is the information I'm gonna look for? Now you're in the crunch of troubleshooting, and you also have to think about all these things, right? And with Log Insight, especially because we're talking about DFW, you wanna make sure that the logging is turned on. And you can build something like this. So as an operations guy, you know what are the kind of things that you want to see for your application. Like, you want to see latency, you want to see source ports and destination ports, you want to see the number of data. I mean, whatever the kind of things that you want to see, right? You can build, these are individual widgets. This is not one thing. This is like all of these boxes are widgets of their own, and there are some that come out of the box, but you can build your own. So the idea is that the architects in you can build these dashboards for the information that you want to see and give it to your operations guy, the NOC, right? So when an issue happens, they know exactly where to go. They know exactly at the top, you can say in past 24 hours, past 5 minutes, or whatever time you want, and what source IP or destination IP you want to troubleshoot. But the point being that you have exactly what information you think you need when you're doing the troubleshooting, right? So this, again, you can enable yourself and your team to be more efficient when the time are tough and you're actually in the middle of troubleshooting. So the next one, I'm going to go into the NSX native tools, is TraceFlow. So what TraceFlow does, it's like Traceroute on steroids. So what you can do is you can say, hey, I have these 2 VMs in my environment, and I want to see what would happen if the traffic goes between them? So think about it, somebody opens a ticket, app guy saying, hey, my web is not able to talk to the app server, or app is not able to talk to the DB server. So as an operations guy, how are you gonna do that validation, right? And how are you going to know what logical switches it's on, which DLR it's on, which host it's on, which rule is impacting? Like, there's a lot of information to gather, right? And then most of the times what you do is you go and start pinging. Ping from here and there and see it works. But ping may be blocked. So how do you actually create a packet which is equivalent as close as possible to the real data without asking the applications guy to reproduce the problem? So Traceflow, what you can do is you can say, hey, I want source VM from my environment, for example here, the web VM, and which NIC on that VM is generating the traffic, and then I can select the destination, so I can either put an IP or I can put another entity within the environment, and then I can do advanced options, and I can say, let's say, protocol TCP, destination port 80, and I can also select the flags. I can say SYN or SYNAC or whatever, and it will actually produce a packet, and it will inject it at the VNIC of the source VM, and it will arrive at the destination VM. And you'll see what happened to that packet on that path. So if it gets blocked by a firewall rule, or if your IPS IDS device like a PAN or a checkpoint blocked it, or the routing didn't happen, you will actually see exactly where the packet was dropped. So from an operations perspective, the guy knows exactly where to go. For the level 1, level 2 guy, when he's escalating to the network engineer, he's not going to say something's broken. He's going to say, hey, this source, this destination is not being routed at this DLR, or firewall rule number 1001 is dropping this packet, right? So the mean time to resolution can be cut real short and this is not advanced tool. This is the level 1, level 2 tool. As you can see, anybody in the environment would be able to use, right? Now the next one is flow monitoring. So flow monitoring is one level more closer to the actual traffic. So what you're saying is that I want somebody reported, for example, that this VM is not working or traffic's blocked or whatnot, and you say, I wonder how can I look at what this VM is doing right now. So one way of doing that is packet capture, right? I mean, that's great, but that's a little advanced. So what's the step before that? The step before that for your operations guy is to be able to do something like this. Go in the UI and select the VNIC. Say, for example, I'm looking for this VM. It's the HR Web VM or whatever. Yeah, actually, I remember that. It was HR Web VM. I recorded the demo. So, and you can say, hey, start capturing. And it's going to start collecting what traffic is going as we speak. Right? There's no delay. As I was saying, closest to the truth. And you can filter it. You can say source IP, destination IP. And you can also, if you see the first column, you can pick the rule ID. You can say, hey, which rule ID is allowing it or blocking it or whatever, right? So it, again, the operations guy is not going to go to the security guy, hey, this application is down, but he's going to say, hey, rule number 1005 is the one which is blocking traffic from source IP this to destination IP this, right? Again, the mean time to resolution can be cut real short with the basic use of some of these tools. All right, now let's talk about the advanced piece of when you need to do something like packet capturing. So packet capturing, for any of you who's still running 6.3 or prior, was CLI based only. But in 6.4, it is now a UI based. So what you can do here, and this is very key, because a lot of times what I've seen, and even in my past life when I was in the NOC, and you need to take a packet capture, what are your options? RSPAN, ERSPAN, or you need to get, if you have a tab device in the environment, you need to work that out. Or you have to go and ask the app guy, hey, can I install Wireshark in here? Most of the times for production environment, no, you can't install Wireshark in there, right? So as an NSX operator, what are your options? The NSX allows you to take packet captures while staying outside of the VM at the VNIC level. So what you can say, hey, I want packet capture here at this host, and on the host, I want to take a packet capture, for example, for a specific VM, so VNIC, but you can take packet capture at physical and VMKs, and as you can see, and then you can select the VNIC. So for example, here, this VM, I want to take a packet capture at this VNIC. And I'm not showing, but you can also do the filtering. You can say, ICMP only, port this, port that, and then you just, just generating some traffic in here. And I go back in here and I say, okay, I want to stop this session. And once I stop the session, NSX Manager is going to pull the packet capture file from the host and make it available for you to download. So you click the download and you can just write it, right? So think about it, just the troubleshooting made so much easier. Taking a packet capture, everybody wants to do that, but just the logistics to get to that is so difficult. But here, as you saw, right, you're not inside the environment, inside the VM. You're just outside. As the NSX administrator, you're able to get to this point. All right. So the next piece I wanted to talk about is going down level 1, level 2 advanced, right? So NSX-PowerOps, it's an open source community tool that I've built with some of my colleagues. We have a session on Wednesday, 1642. Highly encourage you guys to come. Love to see you back. And the idea here is that, going back to what I said before, we go to customer, they're like, do you have any documentation? No. Do you have any diagrams? Not really, or they're outdated. What changed? Well, don't really have a good answer for that either. So NSX-PowerOps is a very easy to use menu-driven tool. You don't need to know any scripting. It's a PowerShell, PowerNSX based tool. What it does, it takes like 10 minutes to deploy. There are over 250 customers that I know of that are using it. We launched it last year at VMworld. So if I look at the downloads, there's a lot of traction there. Basically, there are two things we want to do. One is automate the documentation of your environment. So it automatically creates Excel-based complete documentation of your environment. And not just the desired state, like what you configured. It does the desired state. So when I say desired state, so you can say BGP config. That's your desired state, right? The realized state is the routing table that resulted from that desired state. Now, in NSX, that's a challenge for, when we are coming from the hardware-centric days, is when you are on the router, right? And you say, my BGP neighbor is this. And then you say, show IP route, right? And you can look at the routing tables right there. The first piece that you did, defining your neighbor, is a desired config. The routing table is the realized state of that. We never thought about it in that way, usually because you're at the same CLI, same stop that you're getting both information from. But when you come to NSX, the challenge is bigger because now the config is done in a vCenter UI, in a pretty UI, you type in your stuff, and the realization happens across the environment on all the ESXi hosts and edges and DLRs, right? Now, how do you connect that desired state and realized state together? So as part of our documentation, we create Excel documents where we show you what is the routing config and what is the routing table. So think about from a troubleshooting perspective, if you automate this and you have like a weekly or daily output, if something changes, before you go troubleshooting the whole lot, you can just say, I want a new set of documentation created now, which is going to take 30 seconds, and you can do a diff between the existing and today. And you know exactly which piece failed or changed. So maybe your operations guy calls an engineer, say, hey, we were getting 4 default routes yesterday because we're ECMP, but today I'm only getting 1. So now the troubleshooting cuts down a lot, right? So this is a tool that we've created. One of the outputs is this, which is a visual file. It automatically, zero touch, it creates a visual file of your network that you have. So the edges, DLRs, switches, all the IPs, and it also has the XML for the edges, so you can kind of recreate it. So I don't say that this is a must-have, but it's highly recommended tool, because as part of what we do, my team and the PSO team, a colleague of mine from PSO is here, is we have learning from the field, and then we feed that back into product. But oftentimes it takes a long time for things to get productized. And to fill the gap, we come up with things like this, these tools where we're like, okay, let's enable the customers to get this information, and then over the period of time, it's going to get productized. All right, so the key takeaways I want to take you guys to take from this session is NSX as a technology brings you a lot of things. To operationalize it, you have a number of NSX native tools, and you want to make sure your level 1, level 2 team is enabled on that. Then you have vSphere level tools. I didn't touch upon that because of shortage of time, but you have a lot of things in the vSphere that help you troubleshoot. And then you have the ecosystem and the open source projects I talked about, and then you have the partner ecosystem. So this is the thing that I was talking about is if you can just kind of remember this picture and build upon, then it will make it easy for you to understand what are the tools that are available to me and how I can use them the best. So a couple of things, as I mentioned, there's session 1642 on Wednesday. If you're interested in more automation, then Power NSX is also done by my team, customer success. They have a session 1528. I highly encourage you to go there. One last thing I want to mention because troubleshooting is piece of operationalizing NSX. It's not the whole. So the bigger challenges, interestingly, that I've seen is not in the technology part. The bigger challenges in operationalizing NSX in people is in people and process. Like, how do I reshape my team? What kind of people I need? What kind of skill do they need? How do I group the teams together? How do I break the silos? What process needs re-engineering and that kind of stuff, right? So we have a book, Operationalizing VMware NSX, that Kevin and myself wrote. It was released last year. It's available PDF. It's also in the VMware bookstore. I highly encourage you guys to look at some of these. The small SMB and the multi-site design guides are pretty good as well. One last thing is that, for example, last year, this session was an hour, right? And there are multiple sessions. And when the attendees don't give a lot of feedback on the session's timings, and then the sessions may get dropped. So if you guys want any of the session that you go to, if you want that to see more of that or extended version of that, please fill out the survey. That's the only way they can go back and see if this is a useful session for the audience or not. So with that, we're pretty much out of time, but if you want to ask any questions, please feel free to come up.
Earlier, you were showing the differences between 6.3 and 6.4 in packet capture. Can you, using 6.3, can you capture packet, and how do you analyze it through GUI?
Right. So the question, again, is how do you do packet capturing and analysis in 6.3? So the same thing is available just from the CLI. So what you do is you go on CLI, and there's CLI guide available, where you say, I want to start a new session, and I want this session to be started on this VM or this host and this VM and whatever. And then once you are done, then you run another command, CLI command on central CLI saying, stop this session, and then you say, I want to retrieve the file for this session. So it's just not in the UI, but the same functionality is there. So debug packet capture kind of command. Sure.
So for the rest of the function, okay, so if the source is VM and the destination is suppose a physical device outside of VM, so how is it?
Right. So I had it on the slide, but it was so one of the things where we need to understand the scope, as I was talking about the network insight piece, the scope for the trace flow is one site and the edge. So it will show you the packet from wherever you started to either the edge. So if it's going to physical via the edge, it will show you the packet was delivered to the edge, but it won't show you after that. No, it will show it arrived at the edge. So it will show like, the packet left the VM, went through these firewall rules, logical switch, DLR, and it arrived at the edge. But vRLI's network insight will show you, it went through the edge, and if you integrate and bring in your physical, because you can create a data source in vRNI, which is your physical, so your Cisco 7Ks, 9Ks, and Aristas, and a PAN, and all that. If you bring that in and create a data source, then it will show you how the packet even hit the physical and how it propagated in the physical. So PowerOps is a very simple PowerShell script. All you do is go to GitHub, download it. It has a couple of dependency, Windows VM, and Power CLI and PowerShell versions, 5.165, whatever, which is pretty much standard now. And that's it. And then you just execute it. It has a very nice menu-driven menu where you hit 1, 2. So for documentation, you just say hit 3, documentation. Hit 4, health checks. And then what you can also do is automate. So you can say, I want the documentation to be emailed to me. So you can put your email address and the email server, and you'll get the documentation zipped and emailed to you as well. You can do, it does health checks. So you can say, for example, I want to test VTAP. I want to make sure that the MTU at the fabric is configured correctly across all the hosts. So you can say, hey, go do a VTAP ping test. So what it will do, it will initiate a ping from each tap in the environment to all the taps in the environment. And then it will produce an Excel document showing from which VMK on which host, which IP to which VMK, which host, which IP, you have a failure. So if you have more questions on 1642, Wednesday at 11:30, I think, we have a full hour, so we'll have demo, and we can talk a lot more. But if you want to just play with it, just download nsx-powerops.com, and you can play with it. So the question is that if you have an intermittent issue, for example, the edge gets deployed successfully, but sometimes it doesn't, the best way to look at that would be Log Insight, because you're looking for the logs during the time of the deployment and see when it failed, what happened. Sometimes what may happen is that it picked a host which was out of resource, or the host was not connected properly, NSX Manager wasn't able to talk to it. There's underlying plumbing, so there's a net CPA channel that needs to be up as well. So you will see in the logs, and that's where Log Insight becomes very powerful, because Log Insight has something called a content pack, which is like an interpreter for your logs. So for example, for you probably don't understand if it says fabric is down, right? What does that mean? And it will interpret it and show you that this is an infrastructure level issue, or it's a firewall level issue. And so and it comes with those dashboards out of the box, and then you can customize those dashboards. One last thing about the Log Insight is you can share the dashboard. So as an engineer, I may build a dashboard, and then I'm like, this is interesting. Or as an architect, you build a dashboard, and then you can share it with your operations team, right? So, and you can export and modify. Any version of NSX for vSphere, yes.
The PowerOps, does it give you the diagram if you have a cross vCenter NSX?
So it shows you one NSX diagram. So it will produce two separate diagrams for you. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, now I remember what I want to say. So what we allow in PowerOps is you can create connection profiles. So if you have multiple sites, you have a lab environment or whatever, you can create multiple connection profiles, and then you just need to say, hey, I want to connect to my lab environment or site 1 or site 2, and just run the test or documentation. And you can say, hey, create a document for me. It's going to create your component, NSX components, which is configuration of all the components, then the ESXi host, the routing table at each ESXi host, the VIBs at each ESXi host, what's the version, when it was installed, load balancing, how many load balancing edges do you have, which VIBs, which protocol, what are the pool members, what are the IPs, all of that information is documented for you automatically. Anything else?
Is there only one local root or one local account for NSX Manager, or can you integrate it with AD or anything like that?
Yeah, so you can integrate with AD. So there are a couple of things there. So you can integrate with AD or vCenter group. So you can log in with your AD account, which is a vCenter, which is tied to the vCenter. You can also create CLI only users. So if you wanted something to only have access to CLI and not the web, you can do that as well. No, that's been there, but 6.3, it's the CLI only user is more cleaner. There were some things in previous version, but all the other RBAC and integration with ADs has been there since before. Great questions, guys. Last year we had SOCs to give out with questions, but this year seems like we don't have anything. But thanks for all the questions. That's great. All right, guys. T-shirt? Oh no, I don't know. Thank you. Yeah, thanks. All right, guys. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it.